Croak, the Director of Public Relations for the New York Giants, on the phone waiting for the decision from George Young, Bill Parcells, Tom Boyster, and Tim Rooney has joined them now over in the Meadowlands at Giant Stadium. We should say congratulations to Bill Parcells, too. He got a contract extension. It was announced today after the negotiations and discussions with George Young over the course of the last few weeks. You mentioned Carthen, of course, coming over from the United States Football League, will provide them with some blocking ability as a fullback. There are some people who think they may go defensive end route, maybe possibly Sims of Wisconsin.
Well, I'm afraid to say it because then Paul will say that I'm covering myself in 12 directions.
No, go ahead.
So I'll just stick with one player, and one player alone, Greg Allen, and if not, then you won't see me anymore today.
Here's Greg Allen, Paul, who started off the year possibly as one of the top 2 or 3 backs in the country. He had nagging injuries during the course of the year. He's undergone knee surgery, but he still supposedly is in good shape now and ready to go.
The thing that you keep in mind, it was successful knee surgery, George, and that's the key to it. He is an excellent running back. But I just, when you get a guy like Carthen, and you know they had to pay him some money to get him, why would you go back out and get another running back? I think they can pick up a running back somewhere in the second round. I don't think that they're going to take a running back in the first round. So I'm going out on a limb. I'm not telling you who they're going to take. I know who they're going to take, but I'm not going to tell you until after they pick it.
Well, I'd love to see them take Trainowitz. I think Trainowitz is the most underrated player coming out of this draft. People have him rated the 3rd or 4th best center. He's the best college center I've ever seen. I'll just go out on a limb and say.
Ed Croak has handed the card on. Here's Don Weiss. I'm not sure, but I think I might have seen Kentucky. That could have been Adams as he was riding it at the tail end there.
No, Florida State yourself.
Okay. Here's Don Weiss giving the card to the commissioner, and then we'll go to Sam Rosen upstairs for a reaction.
New York Giants picking 19th in the first round. The Giants select running back George Adams of Kentucky.
I'm going to quit. I'm finished. That's it, folks.
Well, we can read well upside down anyways. Adams takes the selection as the Giants, the 19th selection in the first round. Sam Rosen up in the gallery for ESPN, as he has been all day long, trying to get things together with some of the fans who are here. Obviously, being in New York City, Jet and Giant fans are all over the place. Let's see how they view this pick upstairs. Sam?
And there was a loud cheer upstairs here because the pick of George Adams was welcomed by the fans here. You called it, right?
I called it, and I drove all the way up from Washington, D.C. to see it happen.
What do you think he'll do for the Giants?
Joe Morrison needs help, and they got enough fullbacks, and he'll be a great asset to the team.
Okay, what do you think of the pick?
I would have taken Allen, but Adams is a very good choice, too. You know, I hope he has enough speed.
All right. The people over here thought it would be defense. They went offense.
As I told you, I would have picked Baron Garris, but I'm not dissatisfied with the pick of Adams. I think he's a James Wilder type, and hey, that's going to help our offense.
What do you think, guys? Good pick?
Yeah.
All right. Pretty good pick for the New York Giants as they go with running back George Adams. We'll be back with more of our coverage of the NFL Draft in just a moment.
Hi, I'm George Adams. We're waiting on the Steelers to be followed by the Rams, and for those Giant fans who thought perhaps they would see a selection of Herschel Walker, It's going to be real interesting now to see when the logjam breaks, who's the first guy going to push the chip out there on the table, take a USFL player, and then what the reaction to that then becomes. However, Adams, running back from Kentucky, it wasn't Allen. It turned out to be Adams, the best running back they've had in Lexington since 1973. A powerful guy who can run through his defenders.
He can play halfback or fullback, Bob. And when you look at a guy like Adams, a very hard worker, and I think that played a part in the Giants' decision. They like guys with good attitude that are winners. George Young really gives them, really looks into that rather closely to make sure that they have a great attitude. Adams does. He came to Kentucky bench pressing only 135 pounds. Now he bench presses 360, which shows he spends the time needed in the weight room. He works hard. A good all-around player, not a franchise back, but a good feature back, a good all-around player who can help you at halfback or fullback.
You know, Mel, that
Adams was projected as a fullback mainly because there aren't really any blue chip fullbacks in this draft. He was projected either way, but with Carthen coming, I guess he didn't have to play the fullback with the Giants.
Well, either way, Carthen will be a good short yardage runner for him. I don't think he'll necessarily start. I think Adams, and of course you have Carpenter, may be traded. You still have Joe Morris. You have a logjam there at running back now.
Well, I tell you what, before Adams was picked with the 18th overall selection, St. Louis selected Freddie Joe Nunn, defensive end linebacker type, like Dolman, who went earlier, and we have Freddie Joe on the phone now from down in Mississippi. And Freddie Joe, well, I tell you what, we'll get back to you, Freddie, in a moment. Do you understand the Steelers are going to pick? Let's go now quickly to New York.
Pittsburgh Steelers, first-round selection. Defensive end, Darrell Sims, Wisconsin. That's Wisconsin's third first-round pick so far.
And so Darrell Sims of Wisconsin selected 20th pick overall. Next up, the Rams. And we had heard so much talk and discussion of a Vince Ferragamo trade. If it's going to happen, this may be the time at which it occurs. Now, we were recapping some of the latter picks. St. Louis picking Freddie Joe Nunn, a linebacker out of Ole Miss. This will be another case, if Freddie sticks at linebacker, of converting a stand-up defensive end, Mel, to an NFL linebacking core, a guy who really came on very well in the postseason and edged his way up among the linebacking core.
He really did. He has all the physical attributes you look for. Ran a 4.48 at the combine workout at 221 pounds. Can play defensive end. Could be like a Fred Dean type. Could be an outside linebacker. I think St. Louis is going to look at him as an outside linebacker. You know, his coverage ability needs some work. I think St. Louis, the way they need their linebackers to cover, he might have some trouble initially, but he could always possibly work into a defensive end if he grows into the position.
You know, I guess before this season, Mel, a lot of people did not think of him as a first-round pick. Now, I tried to place him with the Jets. I tried to place him with the 49ers. I guess I got midway in St. Louis, the gateway to the West. Freddie Joe, what raised a lot of people's eyes, and I'm sure yours too, he improved in every game this season. He was dominant in postseason play. After the postseason play, he had great workouts. He's a blitzer with very rare speed, 4.6 speed coming with that kind of a size. He's got quick hands, and the scouts I talked to rate him better linebacker than Ship, Cannon, and Todd Shell, all who went in the first round last year at that position. So he is a guy that really improved himself as game and month after month went by. Now, we're going to try it again. Freddie Joe, you've been good to wait for this long. Our congratulations to you for being drafted in the first round. How do you feel being an early pick in the NFL draft?
Well, this is a great feeling. It kind of surprised me that they picked me so soon.
Really? I mean, it seemed to me that some teams had to be talking to you very late in the last couple of weeks, wondering about, you know, your time and everything else. You are surprised that you went to the first round, huh?
Yes, I am. I've been talking to a lot of teams the last couple of weeks, and I guess that kind of helped me out.
I know that you are projected at linebacker. How do you feel about playing linebacker now after playing some defensive end at school?
Well, I think I feel comfortable at linebacker because I've played it before, and I've also played defensive end, so it really didn't matter which position they got me at.
And you're going to a team now that has an excellent middle linebacker in E.J. Jr., and they want you to get to the passer. You're going to a St. Louis Cardinal football team that is very close to a playoff team. Congratulations. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks.
Okay, that was Freddie Joe Nunn down from Mississippi, a guy who just skyrocketed on a lot of the charts, and now he goes with the St. Louis Cardinals. And really, they are a team that is very close and is knocking at the door. Now, we have a look, Bob, at some of the schools. Obviously, this is the first from Mississippi, but we've seen, well, 3 from Wisconsin and some 2s.
When was the last time Wisconsin, at this point, the first round of a draft, would lead the way? I honestly don't know.
Elroy Hirsch.
I guess maybe you'd have to go back to Crazy Legs Day. Wisconsin leads the way. The Pittsburgh selections came early. Of course, Bill Fralick was the overall number 2 selection in the draft, and Chris Dolan the overall number 4 selection. So Wisconsin leads the way. The Rams are up next to be followed by the Bears and then the Raiders, and that always is a sweet mystery on draft day, exactly what's going through the head of Al Davis and what selection he will make. And as Tom Flores told us in our draft special, whether it's camouflage or smoke and mirrors or what, the Raiders, they just go out there and look for a winner, if you can put that in a quantitative formula for this entire draft. We're awaiting the Rams. Will continue from the Sports Center and from New York City draft headquarters after this.
wide receiver. You call the defensive end or something. Well, I thought there would be a lot of trades. I thought Ferragamo would be traded by now. I thought Danny White might have been traded. I thought with the Packers moving, when the Packers were involved in that trade, John Jefferson has been on the block for a long time. Jim Zorn may be going. Of course, there may be something coming up with draft picks involving the Bears pick and Seattle. That was in the works the last couple of days, but we shall see if that's going to happen. Bears interested in stockpiling picks next year, which is laden with blue-chip running backs as it comes to the time to get a successor to Walter Payton. That was their rumor, that they wanted some picks next year in exchange for this draft selection here. Seattle and Washington without a first-round pick this year so far.
Speaking of things the Bears have, what they don't have are rights to anybody from last year's supplemental draft. They worked those trades with the Browns, so we'll see again. The USFL factor on the surface has not yet been apparent. We're waiting to see what Chicago does, to be followed by the Raiders, and then New Orleans will select number 24. The selection they acquired from Washington in the trade for George Rogers. But stepping back to the number 20 selection, which was Darrell Sims out of Wisconsin. There's got to be a great party going on in Madison. Wisconsin has 3 selections leading the way so far in this first round. Young man who came on in 1980, was academically, though, ineligible in 1983 and went back to summer school, got everything together. A real chippy attitude and had a great game in this game in Japan.
Well, it was a tremendous game, Bob. This was the game that really put him into the first round. Up until this point, he was a very inconsistent player, had problems at Wisconsin as far as injuries this year, was academically ineligible 1 year. This was really the game that showed what kind of ability he has when he's in a defense where he can be turned loose. And I think that his best football is ahead. Naturally, the inconsistency causes some concern, but I'm sure with a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers, they need a pass rush, as you saw last year against Miami. They couldn't get to Marino. Sims will be a welcome addition to the Steelers.
And so the Rams, having just selected, took defensive back Jerry Gray of Texas. We're waiting to see what Chicago does, and then the Raiders. 15 minutes per selection in the first round, and the USFL has not really been a factor, as we said, on the surface. No one has utilized any picks yet to take an exact USFL player. The supplemental draft rights from last year's NFL supplemental draft exist for 4 years from last year, so from 3 years hence, the teams that drafted last year in the 3-round supplemental draft still have the rights to those players. And, of course, you were following the USFL story yesterday, so not yet a major factor, no trades involving existing NFL players. The Bears are up, and we'll be back on ESPN. Playoff team, and there was electricity in the air. There was also a season where there was instability because of injuries at the quarterback situation. The Bears own the next pick, the 22nd pick in the draft. And again, David Sullivan is by to take a look at what Mike Ditka's needs could be approaching this draft in '85. Dave?
When a team manages to make the playoffs, despite being forced to start 5 different quarterbacks through a 16-game NFL schedule, you can rest assured that that team has a superior defense. And there is no better defense than Ditka's revitalized Monsters of the Midway. Indicative of how much talent has been collected by an underrated Bear personnel operation headed by Bill Tobin and Jim Palmer is the fact that all but 3 of the 11 Bear defensive starters have been acquired through the drafting process. And of the 8 regulars drafted who comprise Buddy Ryan's band of Marauders, 5 of those have been chosen in the premium rounds. The Bears have been especially successful in acquiring prime linebacking talent. Not only did Al Harris make the shift from defensive end to outside linebacker with little trouble, thereby giving the Bears a trio of first-round selections with which to staff the heart of their defense, but this unit figures to be even stronger, given the expected development of the Bears' top draft tandem of a year ago, Wilber Marshall and Ron Rivera.
There you see the clock, 7 minutes and change, waiting on the Chicago Bears selection, which would be the 22nd selection here in the opening round of the National Football League Collegiate Player Draft. Each team, again, gets 15 minutes in this round, 15 minutes in the second round, and then 5 minutes per round after that. Jerry Gray finally selected by the Rams prior to this. Not that much of a surprise when you consider that from that same program comes Johnny Johnson, who's in the same backfield with him.
It was a surprise because he was talking about pass rushers. But I think the Bears now, they want a tight end very badly. That's what Mike Ditka said. I think they figure there'll be one left in the second or third round, anybody they want. Buddy Ryan wants a cornerback, but I don't think he figures there's any left to devote so high a pick to. And I think my choice, and I've been accurate all day, as you know, is Mike Gann, the defensive end for Notre Dame. I think they feel that they have great strength in that defensive line, but they're thin.
He's shaking his head already over there.
No.
I'm shaking my head, too.
I've had almost every one of these right. I just had them on the wrong teams. So, they're going for a cornerback, and the guy they're going to go for is Ike Holt.
No, Denver's taking him.
No, he's not.
I'm telling you, Denver's taking him. And let's just close the discussion
I'm not
on that.
listening to you anymore because you were ready to leave 3 times and you haven't left yet.
Well, I'm making a comeback.
We're going to put our bets down while you're away, and when we return, ESPN's live and continuous coverage of the 1985 National Football League player draft will continue from the Omni Park Central in New York.
The Rams went for the defensive back. Season before last, 1983, the Texas defensive backfield had scouts drooling. This year, he had new partners, Jerry Gray, so remember what he did to Bo Jackson last year, though. This guy is a hitter at a safety position.
No, I got to ask you this. He was simply the best player available on the board. I didn't think that defensive back was where the Rams wanted to look first.
I didn't think they did, but they probably were surprised he was still there. You look at Jerry Gray, and of course the injury problems that the Rams had in the secondary last year was specifically Nolan Cromwell. The fact that Gray can play cornerback or safety, was a pure safety at Texas that has the speed and the instincts to play corner. I think it was an excellent selection, and a player who really shouldn't have lasted that long. Had a great junior year, tailed off his senior year, but like Bob said, it was because he was working with 3 untested sophomores, and he really had to cover up their mistakes.
And he's described as a Johnny Johnson-type athlete, and we'll get to see how much he is like Johnny Johnson since they're now on the same team.
And we'll see how the Bears approach the situation, by which they were a playoff team, and they have 3.5 minutes left, George.
Right, Bob, the other factor, of course, coming from one of the best man-to-man defensive teaching systems in all of college football, and that's something that the pros always look at the University of Texas when you do get a defensive back from there. We're waiting on the Chicago Bears. Then after that, the Los Angeles Raiders. Let's step ahead one and talk about the Raiders and see where we think they might be going come their first pick.
Offensive line, they had, of the people they thought might be left, Kevin Allen, then Lachey, and now they're going to go probably down to Darren Gilbert of Fullerton State. They had real problems at the end of the season with their offensive line. Everybody that they thought was a big strength turned out to be a problem guy. Darby is old. Kurt Marsh they like very much, but he's coming back from an injury, not fully back. Henry Lawrence had a breakdown in the playoffs against Jacob Green. Bruce Davis, they had to yank from one game. Shelby Jordan is a little old. Don Mosbar is hurt all the time. You know, one of their great strength areas is now a weak area. And I think they have to go offensive line, which means that they'll go defensive back, of course.
Paul, when you look at the Raiders, it's always an interesting story because they are not a member of the Combines. They do it on their own. They always have.
They went to the Combine this year. They were down there in Phoenix, and they will probably take Bruce Colley from Texas Arlington.
And thereby win you, how much? $5?
2 minutes remaining on the Chicago selection.
Yeah.
We're left with 2 minutes on that selection for the Chicago Bears. Then the Los Angeles Raiders will be up. After that, it'll be New Orleans from Washington, Cincinnati from Seattle, Denver, Miami, and then the New England Patriots. As you may not be aware of, if you're just joining us, New England and San Francisco swapped their picks in the first round. There have been a couple of deals here in the early going. There you see the clock running down. Less than a minute 40 now for the Chicago Bears to make their selection here in the opening.
Remember last year the Bears went right down to the wire on Wilbur Marshall in their spot. It was very dramatic. And I think right now they're trying to talk Mike Dick into the fact that there will be a tight end available farther down.
The Raiders will be up after that. And, of course, when you look at this first round and you project ahead, Los Angeles, when you look at the Raiders, they have this pick in the first round. And then after that, they're a little bit lighter from here on out.
And Buffalo makes up for it. They have 8 in the first 4 rounds.
2 in each round.
Yeah,
2 in the first, second, third,
regular day of picks.
Day of picks. Looking ahead, Paul, New Orleans in the Washington trade. Of course, they from Washington in their pick. What direction do you think they'll go?
Well, you know, they need a wide receiver. They need a wide receiver with a lot of, I think they do with a lot of speed. So that may be the area that they're going to go. And I don't know what's left over there, though.
Here's Don Weiss with the selection to the commissioner for the Chicago Bears, the 22nd player selected here in the first round.
Take Mike Gann. Give me a break.
Chicago Bears. Chicago Bears first round pick, William Perry, defensive tackle of Cleveland.
Oh, what an upset.
Defensive tackle of Clemson.
The human refrigerator, William Perry, the defensive tackle.
That's the most exotic pick of the day. I mean, I heard scouts legitimately say that he will not go before the 5th round, that he's going to get the shock of his life on draft day. I heard nothing but negatives about William Perry. The only team that really showed a great interest was the Raiders, and they said not as a first-rounder. They all felt, you know, he's like a knight in armor, that if he fell down, he'd never get up again.
His size, of course, is a positive to some, but a negative more to others.
Do they still have the Chicago stockyards? Because they're going to need him to feed William Perry. I saw him at the Combine, George, and he was about as close to 360 as you're going to get. And I've watched him for a long time, and he is a good player. But the thing, his stamina is just not there. And to use a first-round draft pick, they must insist that he lose an awful lot of weight so that he has the stamina to play, because you don't take a first-rounder and use him as a spot player.
I heard he had really made an effort to trim down for the draft. Maybe it's just cosmetic for the draft, but he's in the sauna, you know, doing all these things, and he probably got his weight down below 500 or something.
Well, let's say this much, that in years past, let's look back last year, Louis Lips, a lot of people never thought that he was going to make it, and he ends up being one of the finest players
he was
of
highly
the year.
Rated.
He went down deep. There were other people taken before him.
Low first round, he projected the low first, high second. But Perry, I mean, really, scouts have projected terrible things for him this year.
Here you have it, over 300 pounds. Some people say up around 340, possibly 330 at this point in time. He can carry it at 6'3". The defensive tackle who smothers ball carriers, as he did right here.
He is awesome.
He's lifting that guy and taking him back to the refrigerator.
There are, you know, it's going to take more than one person. He's a legitimate third down player. I mean, you're going to have to put two people on him to stop him. But again, George, we're looking at consistency in a football player.
You have that interesting defense. They use that 46 defense where they man up, you know, the 3 defensive linemen. So figuring, put this guy on a center, and he'll probably beat the guy to death by the 4th quarter. The center will be punchy, and then somebody else will take over.
Well, Mike Ditka's going to get a chance to take a pretty good look at him, because the Chicago Bears have taken William Perry here on the first round, the 22nd player selected. The Los Angeles Raiders will be up next when we return.
Draft live on ESPN here at the Sports Center, along with Mel Kiper Jr. and with Chris Berman. I'm Bob Lee. You want to take your pick of surprises, perhaps the fact that the wide receiver glut, the dam was closed for a while, then it broke. The top 3 wide receivers went. And then Chicago. You might go neck and neck for surprises right now, going for William Perry.
Is that a pun, neck and neck? I mean, because his shirt size could be 25.
I'll tell you what, though. You know, we say 305. We showed you graphically. Mel, you said he once weighed in at 370. You'd have to check with the Chicago Postmaster. He could qualify for his own zip code. But you don't seem to think he's going to make it.
And not at that weight. I saw him against Maryland. He was had to be about 370. And we saw on the screen when they were describing Perry, the one tackle he made, and I saw him make about 3 tackles against Kevin Glover when he played Maryland, and that was all. Glover just dominated Perry, and he was the last person on the field and the last person off the field. And at 370, he just can't play. I'm sure the Bears will have a weight clause in his contract. Right now, I think that's one of the reasons he went in the first round. He's reported to be in that 322 range, which is all right. You would prefer him to be about 315, 310.
Well, Mel, I heard that if he does play at 320, 315, and he can get down there, then you know, everybody says still he's over 300 pounds, he's not nimble, but some of the scouts told me he is nimble at that weight.
At that weight, but not at 370. At 370, he's a reject. At 310, he's a dynamo. Take your pick.
And we graded him out at his best grade was strength at 4.6, but against the run and against the pass. Now, these are the combine grades that the scouts use in a 5-point system, if you've just joined us. Below 4 on both. I mean, first-round selections, you want your grades high 3s, middle 4s, I would think. So you graded out to a 16.2. We are waiting, and those are the grades we told you about on a 5-point system. Very strong, but can he get the job done? As you said, in that one game against Maryland, he did not impress you, and he has been the first-round selection of Chicago with the Raiders up. And the Saints to follow. Well, let's see. How much of the Raider mystique will we be surprised, or has it been blue smoke and mirrors, and will they make a predictable pick, or is there anything predictable about the Raiders?
The only rumor was that maybe they were blowing smoke is that they might be the one to go with Herschel Walker. They do not pick in the 2nd. They only pick in the 3rd. Now, with this draft, and this was one of the reasons Bobby Beathard made the deal that he did for George Rogers, and we'd said it on the preview show, after about 18 and 19, there aren't really your classic first-round picks. Hence, a guy like Perry goes there, because you said yesterday, Mel, that the last 8 in the first round are kind of the same as all the second round and some of the third rounders, so maybe it isn't such a surprise that Perry went here.
It's not a surprise at all, considering he may be at 322. Now, you look at two players. There's Mike Kelly and Mike Gann, two fine Notre Dame players. I thought Gann would go to the Bears instead of Perry. They're still on the board. We look at New Orleans up after the Raiders. I look for him either to take Isaac Holt or Alvin Toles, a linebacker of Tennessee. You know, Ricky Jackson was in an altercation with Bum Phillips several weeks ago. So Jackson may be on a trading block, which means New Orleans needs a linebacker. I think it's either going to be Toles or Isaac Holt from Alcorn State to fill a need, because Waymer and Poe are both unsigned and may go USFL.
So that's your call. I mean, you've been pretty good. That's your,
I think New Orleans is either going to be Holt or Toles, one or the other.
Isn't there a great deal of pressure on the Saints because, I mean, they had both Rodgers and Campbell at the same time, and people were scratching their head. Heck, there's only one football, and one guy's not going to spend most of his time blocking. Now Rodgers is with the Skins. And then the quarterback situation, which apparently was not handled well. There seems to be some pressure. Bum's got to produce.
He does. He seems to go one step forward and two steps backward every time he makes a decision. And I look at New Orleans, and the trade with Rodgers didn't make much sense to me, considering that Campbell's at the end of the trail. Of course, the selection that they have here will fill a void if they take Toles, but if they lose Jackson in trade, that's the one step forward, two steps backward I'm talking about.
Success on the field in New Orleans has been defined by just getting to the 500 mark and really becoming a contender. That is the next step for New Orleans, and David Sullivan will take a look at the roster and the needs. This look at the New Orleans Saints as they approach this 1985 draft, and they are next up after the Los Angeles Raiders. This pick from New Orleans, this is the one that Washington traded. And we'll take a look now with David Sullivan at a look at the Saints and exactly what they have coming into this draft and what their opinions might be. They will be picking the number 24 selection.
Thanks to the Redskins' need to bolster their running game, Bum Phillips was able to solve the complex puzzle that had been the Saints' running attack. With George Rogers now in the employ of the Redskins, it will be Earl Campbell who will be the focus of the Saints' hoped-for march into contention. And for the first time in 4 years, the Saints will not sit idle in the opening round of the draft. Phillips is expected to utilize such luxury to revamp an injury-plagued offensive line, and with the next priority being a talented wide receiver with enough speed to give the Saints a much-needed deep threat. Dave Wilson's late-season performance provided an apparent solution to the Saints' quarterback shuffle, in which Phillips apparently and admittedly embarrassed himself in failing to choose between Richard Todd, Ken Stabler, and Wilson until the Saints were out of contention. Injuries resulted in the club's starting offensive tackles, Stan Brock and Dave LaFerry, being relegated to the injured reserve list. In their absence, Phillips inserted a pair of former #1 picks. Chris Ward had been cut loose by the Jets, and Kelvin Clark, the former Bronco, who is better suited to handling the chores at guard. Hence, with Rodgers in Washington and Earl Campbell's expected return to form, Phillips will now have a distinct shot at landing a top offensive lineman to shore up the problems in the trenches, which left Todd, the since-retired Stabler, and heir apparent Wilson battered and bruised far more often than is prudent.
Thank you, David. We are waiting on the selection coming up by the Los Angeles Raiders. The commissioner is ready with a Raiders selection in the first round.
23rd pick of the first round. Select wide receiver Jesse Hester, Florida State. Next selection will be the New Orleans Saints in a trade previously announced, trade with Washington. So next up is New Orleans.
Okay, the selection made by the Raiders, wide receiver Jesse Hester out of Florida State. The Raiders have made their pick, and from the standpoint of the way things have gone so far, we have been waiting for a reaction from the West Coast to see how things have been coming in, with the San Francisco 49ers making their deal, and now the Raiders finally with their first selection. Greg Wyatt is standing by on the West Coast. Let's update you on what's happening on the west side of the country on this first day of the draft. Greg?
Giorgio, the one thing that the Raiders love is a big play guy, and Howard Balzer has been saying all morning, Jesse's going to the Raiders. Boy, were you right.
Well, I guess you know that I was right anyway. But, yeah, they like Jesse Hester very much, a good receiver. The Raiders had a lot of problems last year when Cliff Branch wasn't able to play because of injury, and they need that guy who can open up the offense. And certainly Plunkett had the injury problems, as did Mark Wilson, but they need that wide receiver in there who can open it up and make Marcus Allen even more effective. So even though they were looking a little at offensive linemen, I think they figured they could get a guy like Darren Gilbert or someone like that perhaps later in the draft.
You look at this AFC West, and it's quite interesting because Kansas City got the running back they wanted. And, you know, what can you say? It seems like everybody is getting the folks they want. San Diego Chargers get the help that they need.
Yeah, they were looking for that offensive lineman because of the injury to Andrew Gissinger. Some of those teams might have reached down a little further for those offensive tackles because they started going so fast, 5 in the first 12 picks. But the teams have been getting what they need, and it has been really a need draft when you look at the first round.
Well, it's going to be quite interesting to see what happens here on the West Coast. And the Vince Ferragamo situation, it is still hot and heavy. We'll tell you about that.
Look
as
for
well
Buffalo.
as Eric Dickerson and a few of his contract problems with the LA Rams. Now let's go back to George.
Thank you very much, Greg. We're waiting on the selection by New Orleans from Washington. The commissioner has the card. Again, if you just missed it, Jesse Hester, wide receiver of Florida State, was selected by the Los Angeles Raiders. William Perry, defensive tackle of Clemson, was taken by Chicago. The Rams took Jerry Gray, the defensive back out of the University of Texas, just prior to that. Here is the commissioner.
New Orleans Saints picking on Washington's choice in the 24th spot by way of the previous trade agreement. New Orleans selects linebacker Alvin Tolles, Tennessee. Next up, Cincinnati Bengals on a trade previously announced with Seattle. So Cincinnati next.
Alvin Tolles selected by the New Orleans Saints from Washington in their pick, the 24th pick in the first round. We'll be talking with the commissioner about how the draft has gone so far on this Tuesday in New York after this timeout.
You're an investor. Here's an important telephone number from Charles Schwab and an important message.
I built this software business my way, and I make investment decisions my way. I won't pay a broker high commissions for advice I don't need. My broker is Charles Schwab, the #1 discount broker. With Schwab, I can save up to 76% on commissions compared to what full commission brokers charge. And I get services that count, like instant order execution.
1985 NFL Draft continues, and with me is NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle. Certainly some surprises in the first round of this draft, Commissioner.
Well, they usually are, but they certainly were this time when we didn't have a quarterback, running back, or a wide receiver taking in the first 9 spots, I guess, of the first round. And that was a surprise.
The name Kozar has had an effect on this draft. I wonder if you can explain to the fans the way you ruled in the Kozar situation, why you did what you did.
Basically, it was that we had specific rules in the book, and I just went by them. He will not become anyone's property unless he graduates from summer school. Yeah, I think he has 6 units to take in summer school, and but if he stays healthy, I'm sure he will graduate. But if he's got ill or something, then anyone that had taken him would lose their pick. Cleveland apparently has made a trade with Buffalo for the first pick in the supplementary draft. So if he graduates and announce, why it'll be up. Cleveland will have first pick on it. But certainly Bernie has been a factor after his great year with Miami.
You did not give him special consideration because of the fact that you wanted him in the NFL?
We sure wanted him in the NFL, but you know, you're automatically eligible if you graduate, and that's what it says he intends to do this summer.
Okay, let's take a look at the upcoming season and some of the changes and some of the things that you're studying. Among the things mentioned have been quickening the pace of the game, perhaps looking at the use of replays. Tell us about that.
We're going to do another experiment. I think we did an experiment on instant replay during the preseason about maybe 10 years ago, almost 10 anyway. And at that time, the clubs didn't think it was feasible. So we're going to do another experiment on instant replay on officiating checking officiating calls in the preseason on all of our national preseason game telecasts. And we'll just look at it and discuss the results and what we find, and then I assume that we would not go into it in this regular season.
How will the experiment work?
We're going to monitor the telecast of the picture that's seen at home, and we'll have someone viewing it, and if they feel that something is clearly poorly called by the official, he made a mistake in judgment, or that he was screened off, one or more officials couldn't see the play, it could be reversed.
Will there be appeals by the coaches allowed?
It will come from the official, from the supervisor on top looking at it.
What about quickening the pace of the game and having faster games?
Well, we've made arrangements on the starting the clock and on out of bounds and other plays where we hope to save about 10 or 11 minutes. That would perhaps get it under a 3-hour game during the regular season.
What was your reaction to the news yesterday by the USFL that they will go ahead with plans to play in the fall in 1986?
Well, it'll create a glut of football in the fall with the colleges, ourselves, and the U.S. Football League. But I really think it will be better for us and for the colleges, because I think that year-round football, people have no relief from it. It goes year-round, and I think that it's just healthier. You have your draft, and there's a temporary interest in that, but basically the 6 months off until you go to training camp. And for the NFL and the colleges, I think it'll be better to have it in the fall rather than go year-round.
Commissioner, thanks for having us for the 6th year in a row for the NFL draft, and good luck in the upcoming season.
Congratulations. All of our clubs love the telecast.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Pete Rozelle. Right now, let's go back to Bristol, Connecticut, and Bob Lee.
Thank you, Sam. One reason you have to know that the commissioner is happy with the USFL move, and it has to be stated, is that he holds all the cards with the TV contracts, and at the USFL, they talked a good game yesterday in New Jersey about having some fall TV revenues, but aside from the ESPN cable package, they may find it difficult to get the money needed to sustain the league when it does indeed move to the fall in 1986. And also to pick up with the commissioner, to explain why people are eligible for the draft. There are 3 criteria for eligibility in the draft. If you graduate, regardless of how long it takes you to do that in under 4 years, which is the case with Bernie Kosar, you are eligible to play. If 5 years pass since the time you entered college, you are eligible to be drafted. That is the case this year with Herschel Walker. And if you use up your 4 years of playing eligibility through playing, you are also eligible to enter this draft. Keep your name and your ears peeled for the name today, Tracy Henderson, a wide receiver from Iowa State. There are special eligibility cases. People can petition the NFL each year. Last year, 16 did. None were drafted. Henderson, though, Mel, is an exception. He may be drafted, possibly early 2nd or early 3rd round. He was kicked off the Iowa State team in spring practice. He was a 4th-year junior, and he was able to petition and get a special consideration. Kosar's case is not special. We'll get back to that point. Let's get back to the pick now from the Bengals.
You know, it's a concept. It's okay.
Wait.
We await to see what the commissioner will be doing. The Bengals, this is the pick they got from Seattle in the Blair Bush deal.
Cincinnati selects
Go ahead, Mel. King.
linebacker Emmanuel King from Alabama.
And Mel, yes, you did beat Pete Rozelle to the punch. Emmanuel King was selected, and then Denver and Miami next up. So King is the selected, and let's move back to the Raiders selection. No major surprise, it was Jesse Hester.
It was Jesse Hester. Well, it is a surprise. Some people did not think he would go in the first round, but we have Jesse on the phone with us right now from down in Tallahassee at Florida State. Congratulations, you're going to the Los Angeles Raiders, a team that has been always known as a big play team, and I guess you feel that this is a good place for you to go. Is that right?
Yes, definitely. Anytime a receiver can go to a team like the L.A. Raiders caliber, which they pass the ball quite a bit, is a dream come true for a receiver.
Jesse, when did you have an idea that you would be a first-round pick, or did you think the phone would ring a little later today?
I kind of had a little bit of knowledge of the Raiders were concerned of me, simply because they showed a little bit of, I figured, late first or early second.
Well, you go to a team with an outstanding big play guy over many, many years, Cliff Branch. Now, I don't know growing up whether you had a favorite receiver, but is Branch a guy that you have been watching, or do you have somebody you like to pattern your game after?
Anytime, you can learn from a guy like Cliff Branch, that's a gift for yourself. So Cliff Branch was one of my favorite receivers over the years as I've been growing up, and I'm glad to be in the system behind him.
Well, you beat your, there's the couple of fellas that you might be going up against, Cliff in his 14th year, Barnwell and Dokie Williams. I know the Raiders were not exactly happy with some of their play last year. You beat Greg Allen to the punch. Did you guys have a little side bet to see who'll get drafted first?
Not really. Me and Greg haven't seen each other much this spring, simply because he moved out from the complex. But we do keep pace with each other, but we haven't really been talking about the draft.
All right, Jesse, congratulations on your draft choice today by the Los Angeles Raiders, and good luck in the National Football League.
Thank you.
Okay, Jesse Hessner, who was the first-round pick of the Raiders, and that was a bit of a surprise. He's one of these guys, Mel, that in the last 8 picks, you could pick any one of 30, and I guess he's one that fits the bill right there.
Needs to show more consistency, and I think when you look at the wide receivers at L.A. Raiders, they don't have that consistency, catching the ball across the middle. They have the deep speed, the north-south speed, but they don't come across catching traffic. I think Hester may give them that, but he has to develop that also.
So Herschel will have to wait for yet another day, Bob. It was not the Raiders, at least not in the first round.
Not yet, not so far. It's a long day yet to go. We still have 3 remaining picks in the first round. It'll be Denver and Miami, and then New England picking last because of the trade with San Francisco. We'll be back in just a moment. San Francisco and the Patriots swap some picks today. San Francisco's 1, 2, and 3 picks for New England's 1 and 3. So the Patriots will close out round number 1. So far, there have been 6 defensive linemen and 5 offensive linemen, 11 grunts, if you will. Pardon me, gentlemen, if you're watching, but we hate to use those terms, skilled, but guys that work it out in the trenches. They necessarily do not get a great deal of the publicity through the year. Publicity and reputation does not necessarily count for a lot even after you have been drafted, and Steve Sable continues his look back. Remember Terry Baker? You won't find him through too many NFL record books.
Being selected the #1 pick isn't always a guarantee of a successful career. For every O.J. Simpson, Terry Bradshaw, and Paul Hornung, there are also mistakes like Rocky Thompson, Bob Ferguson, and Walt Patulski. Perhaps the most famous of these might-have-beens was Terry Baker. In 1962, he was a magazine cover boy and Sports Illustrated's Man of the Year. Few college athletes had ever received so much attention. Few have ever had pro careers that were then so disappointing. In 1962, quarterback Terry Baker was the golden boy of college football. Here, wearing number 11, he broke virtually all the records at Oregon State and led the nation in total offense. He guided the Beavers to the Rose Bowl and won major awards for both athletic and academic excellence. The Los Angeles Rams made him the first pick of the 1963 draft, but Baker's fortunes declined steadily after that. Terry's strength was throwing on the run, and the Rams tried to take advantage of that skill by installing the outpost formation. But the gadget offense didn't work and was quickly scrapped. Terry was then tried at halfback and then flanker with mixed results. You'd be hard-pressed to find more highlights than these. By 1966, he was out of football and in law school. Said Baker's college coach, Tommy Prothro, he was more of an all-around player than a specialist, and there's no place for anybody like that in pro football.
The selection for Denver, Don Weiss has the card, and the number 26 selection overall, the Broncos, and then they'll be followed by the Dolphins, and then the Patriots. Just a second, we'll have a chance
slip it in.
Yeah,
I'd go for Mike Gann here. I think he's from that area, and he's a defensive end that should have been gone by now, I think, and he would be the best available athlete. We'll say it again.
Commissioner, tell us who it'll be.
The Denver Broncos. Denver Broncos select running back Steve Sewell from Oklahoma. The next pick, which is the 27th in the first round, will be Miami Dolphins.
Steve Sewell of Oklahoma selected only the third running back out of the first 26 selections. You can't win them all, Mel.
He outthought himself.
I know.
Yesterday.
You had him in the on-deck circle. You didn't quite go with him. So we've had no quarterbacks, 3 running backs, no tight ends, and the 4 wide receivers if you're looking offensively.
Exactly. So, Steve Sewell's the kind of player that Denver's looking for. They need a running back. Sewell has put on about 6 or 7 pounds of muscle the last several weeks, and he's moved up and catches the ball extremely well, could even move the wide receiver in a pinch. And I think he's a versatile player for the Broncos they like.
Well, we talked about the machinations of trading. San Francisco has been active today so far. It looks like the Niners have done rather well, and the man who masterminded it is standing by live with Greg Wyatt. Just a second, we'll be checking in with Coach Bill Walsh because San Francisco already has traded with the Patriots today. They traded up and selected wide receiver Jerry Rice out of Mississippi Valley State. He's a burner, and now he'll play for Coach Bill Walsh. Greg?
The one thing you had told us last week is that you were hoping you could trade up. You not only traded up, but you got a wide receiver you needed.
Well, it worked out well for us, and I'm sure for New England. We all have our needs. In our particular case, we haven't drafted a wide receiver for a long, long time. We have some excellent players at that position, no question about it. But this adds some competitive nature to the thing. We know Jerry Rice is a great one, and we're just proud to have him.
He's not the speed merchant, but he is very durable.
Well, I think he makes plays. I think the speed factor can be overemphasized far too often. He makes big plays. He's a great performer. He has an excellent background in pass receiving. He's proven to us he can do it time and time again, and I just think he'll fit nicely into our style of football.
We saw 5 offensive linemen go in the first 12 picks. As you were watching it unfold and you saw that, hey, this trade might work out, I guess you might have been a little surprised that the wide receivers lasted that long, especially that top group of Rice, Brown, and Altoon.
Well, we were. There's some great receivers in the group, including Rice, but there were some great offensive linemen, too. We knew it was a strong draft for the offensive line, and by and large, if you can get the great player that's a big man that can play for you for 8 or 10 years, you go after him, and I'm sure that's what many of the clubs did.
And now you take a little time off and wait till the 3rd round.
We'll have a lot of donuts and coffee around here.
It has been a long time, but it's got to be tough as a defending champion because I guess people don't really want to trade with you either.
Well, I think everyone has their needs, and unfortunately, in some ways, coaches will only go for young players, and we found that a mix on your team is very important. I think we've had some success in trading for veteran players and being successful. But at the same time, the draft is your basis of everything, and we're watching it today.
I guess you point out the trades, and when it became fashionable, everyone loved the draft, when Pittsburgh won those Super Bowls, and almost their entire roster was made up of draft picks, and Dallas certainly when they were at the top. But now we've sort of seen a trend away in the last few years. The teams that have made it that far, the Super Bowl teams, not only in the draft, like you said, but making the key trades, filling the spots that way.
Well, I think it's a matter of finding athletes that want to play for your club. And so often veteran players can come back late in their careers and continue to play well for other teams. We found that as the Raiders have and the Redskins have, and there just takes a good mix. Young players are a big part of it, but certainly the veteran player is a better player than the younger one if he's healthy.
Well, you can go take a couple of hours off, it looks like, because you don't have a pick for a long, long time. Let's go back to Bobby Lee in Bristol.
Thank you very much, Greg. In fact, the Niners will not pick again until the number 75 slot and the 19th position of the 3rd round. The Dolphins are up. What hath Don Shula wrought this year? Let's take a look in New York City, George.
Thank you, Bob. We are waiting on the Miami Dolphins and their selection, which will be the 27th selection in the 1st round. Then to come would be the New England Patriots in the final selection of the 1st round after swapping with the San Francisco 49ers.
Am I allowed to handicap it, or am I out of it?
Quick pick.
Lorenzo Hampton, halfback, and New England Kevin Glover, center.
Okay, let's go to the commissioner.
Miami Dolphins. 1st round selection, running back. Lorenzo Hampton of Florida.
All right.
I can't believe it.
Paul Zimmerman.
That's good. Now you're going to have to pay him the $10 if you just did the guy on the table to give you the call.
I have to get up both of them to pay off.
New England Patriots are up next. We'll be checking out their selection when we return to ESPN's live and continuous coverage of the 1985 National Football League Collegiate Draft.
You know what this is.
Who did they pick? 1983, Dan Marino.
New England on the last pick in the first round.
Kevin Glover.
Acquired from the 49ers through a previous trade, selects center Trevor Maddich. Brigham Young.
Blew that one.
There you have it. The first round is now completed with the selection of the 6th offensive lineman to be taken in the first round of competition. Trevor Maddich, the center of Brigham Young University, and certainly with a team that passes that much, you figure you're going to have a pretty good pass blocker to help you in the pros.
It had to be the center for them. They were very worried about Pete Broxley. Their offensive line needed help. Maddich must have really come up in the last week because they loved Glover until recently, and they were afraid he wouldn't be there on their original pick. So they must have been very happy that, they had their choice of either one of them down here. So this was the guy they wanted, the position they wanted all along, and they lost nothing by trading down. Now they picked up the extra choice.
How about Lorenzo Hampton out of Florida?
Don Shula fell in love with him. He's got big hands. He can catch the ball. He's a possession-type guy. Shula was down there, it's close by Florida. Shula was down there twice to look him over and fell in love with him.
Well, they have over the last couple of years, the Dolphins. In 82, of course, they kept 9 people from the draft in 82. In 83, they take Marino as a 27th pick. They also got Roby out of 83, which is a significant draft for them. So drafting that deep certainly didn't hurt them in that particular year.
It's an old, actually, if you know what you're doing, even if you draft low down, it's not bad. If you don't know what you're doing, you can draft in any spot and you won't hurt yourself.
Paul, you look at the Miami and New England selections and reaction?
Well, anytime Shula and Miami Dolphins pick, whoever they pick, he's going to play. I agree with Paul in that situation. Trevor Maddich, when you look at a center for New England, coming from a team like Brigham Young that throws 95% of the time, you have an excellent pass blocker. Now, the only thing that you must worry a little bit about is his run blocking, but if you look at him, and I saw him a couple of times this year, he is an excellent run blocker. I had a chance to, against New Mexico to watch Brigham Young, and New Mexico came out with a 9 defensive back defense against him, so they ran the football, and he blocked extremely well. So I'm not worried about him at all. He's just an excellent football player.
All right, let's wrap up the first round in regard to those positions that were taken in the first round, almost identical to a year ago. There were 6 offensive linemen taken in the first round this year. Last year, there were 5 offensive linemen taken. There were 6 defensive linemen taken this time around. There were 6 defensive linemen taken a year ago as well. Linebackers this time around, there were a total of 5 linebackers and 5 wide receivers taken. Last year, there were a total, in terms of the linebacker position, of 6 linebackers taken in the first round. So you can see, as we've discussed prior to the draft, very similar to the last year. We're talking about the big beef up front and the meat and potatoes beef.
I said it on our previous show last night, George. You're going to see a lot of offensive linemen in the first round high forever, as long as they keep pumping in those steroids and creating these laboratory specimens who go 280, rubber stamped, more strength than human beings should have. As long as they keep creating these kind of chemical ball players, you're going to find this.
Just one other thing on offensive linemen, George. You're looking at people that you know can stick around for 12 and 13 years, and that's something they get out of offensive linemen.
3 hours and 36 minutes was the time of this first round. It is the 3rd longest first round since the combined AFL-NFL draft started taking place. Second round coming up. We'll have it after this.
players taken, 14 defensive players taken. You don't want to call it a herd mentality because there was no stampede. Everyone knew coming in you'd see a lot of linemen picked. You wouldn't see any quarterbacks picked. They always measure, of late, the 1983 draft and calling it the quarterback draft. And yes, the last guy to go that year was Dan Marino, Kenny O'Brien, trying to make his bones with the Jets, Tony Eason, Jim Kelly, Todd Blackledge. First-round quarterbacks. We have not seen a first-round quarterback over the last 2 years.
That's no surprise. You may not see one today, Bob, until the 4th or 5th round, although this could be one of those positions where some team may want to take a shot with a quarterback, a team that was in the Kosar hunt, didn't come out with him, and may overdraft. In other words, a lot of teams, Mel, don't even list the next couple of quarterbacks, Bono, Calabria, Reich, maybe, till the 4th or 5th round, but you may see some sneak in, or we may not have any by the time we go off the air, because we'll be about the 4th round at 4 o'clock.
I think you'll see somebody, Chris, and I think the 3rd round would be good for a guy like Reich, Randall Cunningham at UNLV. You mentioned Bono, Calabria from Colgate. I think all 4 of those quarterbacks will be going by the 4th round.
I remember last year we were sitting here going, where's Boomer? Where's Boomer? For a while we were doing that with the wide receivers, but where are the quarterbacks? We might have to wait a bit, Bob.
And that's certainly no surprise. Let's wrap up the balance of the 1st round. The clock is running on Buffalo. Again, in the 2nd round, 15 minutes per selection per team. Trevor Maddich, the center from Brigham Young, was the final player selected in the 1st round, going to New England, 3rd-team All-American. He platooned back in 1983, and the job was his as a senior. And as Paul McGuire mentioned, BYU, they pass a heck of a lot, and Maddich was in the middle causing havoc.
Moves real well, Bob, for a big guy. And if you look at New England Patriots, they had a lot of problems last year when Pete Brock went down with an injury. And, of course, Maddich will give them that insurance policy in case Brock can't come back. And, of course, Maddich could also project to a guard. He has the size that you look for. He needs a little bit more strength work, but he's a good football player. And, you know, I had him going in the 1st pick in the 2nd round to Buffalo. Now Buffalo could go for Mike Kelly. They could go for Training Witcher. They could go for Glover. They're definitely looking for a center.
And then prior to that, the selection made by Miami, that was running back out of Florida, Lorenzo Hampton, who also is a quite good pass receiver, very determined athlete. And you look at what Florida had with Neil Anderson and John L. Williams and Lorenzo Hampton on top of that, quite a stable in Gainesville.
Quite an underrated fact, Bob, when you look at it. Of course, Zim mentioned the fact that Don Shula liked the way he catches the football. He also runs well. Runs high at times, but I think that can be improved with the coaching that he receives now with the Dolphins. He'll get some playing time, but he shouldn't start. Of course, they still have Nathan. They still have Joe Carter, who played well as a rookie. So it's going to be 3 outstanding young backs there. Of course, they don't have a great feature back. They have 3 guys who are role players, and I think you'll see Hampton, Nathan, and Carter really split duty next year.
And now we, of course, can figure out who the Dolphins draft in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round. Just look at all the defensive players that begin with B, and that's obviously who they're going to go with.
Richard Bird's a possibility.
That's right. Denver prior to the Lorenzo Hampton selection, picking 26th. Going for Steve Sewell as we plug in Lorenzo Hampton into the Miami picture. Not with Pete Johnson, who may not figure. Woody Bennett, Tony Nathan, Andre Franklin, and Joe Carter. Yes, Miami needed running backs. They have a good one from Florida locally, fairly locally, in Lorenzo Hampton. Now, I mentioned Steve Sewell out of Oklahoma. A running back, yes, a wide receiver, very probably a pro wide receiver, has very good hands, really hasn't played in a pro-style offense. Steve Sewell out of Oklahoma with 4.61 speed taken by Denver.
Here you see him. He doesn't have the great running ability. He was a wing back at Oklahoma, so his elusiveness is not what you look for. But he did put on 7 pounds of muscle recently, and that really improved his position. Plus, he runs real well for a big guy. You see his long strider here. Tall, angular type back. Outstanding pass receiver, and that's really his strength. For a team like the Broncos with Elway coming out of the backfield, he's outstanding. Really a flawless pass receiver with a great pair of hands.
And it's not a projection like some of the defensive ends who are now projected as linebackers. That's not a reach?
I don't think it is, Chris, to a certain extent. You look at the backs this year, none of them were outstanding. You know, like Greg Allen coming off in the injury, you mentioned Hampton. I think this was a good choice. You have a guy here who's a projection to a certain extent because he did play a wing back. He wasn't a natural running back. He's got a lot of ability, and of course the team like with Elway, they throw the football, and they're going to open up, and I think that you'll see him swinging out of that backfield, catching an awful lot of passes for the Broncos.
Well, that was a natural question to pose to Steve Sewell coming into this draft, having carried the football and caught the football and played wing back as well. His major strength that he can now bring to the Denver Broncos, their first-round selection today.
It'll probably be my ability to catch the ball. I think at OU I was used as blocking back, and you know I also ran the ball some, but I did catch a lot of passes out the backfield, and I think that a pro team will probably use me as catching the ball some out of the backfield.
We continue recapping the end of the first round. The first selection of the second round will be coming along in a few moments. 3 minutes remaining on Buffalo's selection. Let's backtrack again to Emmanuel King's selection by Cincinnati, the selection that they had from Seattle. So King, a stand-up defensive end and linebacker, so your tallies on how many defensive ends and linebackers were taken in the first round might be slightly askew. Where he plugs in. What do you plug him in? Linebacker?
He's got to be a defensive end, Bob. I think he'll be with the Cincinnati Bengals a situational pass rusher, similar to what Greg Townsend was with the Raiders his rookie year. Last year, Browner and Edwards didn't play well. The sack total for the Bengals plummeted last year. They were looking for somebody. They're hoping that Pete Koch develops a little bit more finesse to go with his power. I think they'll use King when they go to their 4-down linemen to go along with the other 3 that we mentioned. And I think he could come up with 10 or 11 sacks next year for the Bengals.
Just before that, the Saints went for linebacker Alvin Tolles out of Tennessee, who began as a fullback, then moved to defense as a sophomore. Very good going from side to side. He might be an outside or an inside guy. He might have the tools to play both spots in the pros.
Had he not broke his ankle in the 4th game this year and missed the rest of the season in the All-Star games, Bob, he would have been a top 10 to 15 pick in the 1st round. This was an excellent choice for New Orleans. As we mentioned before, you know, Ricky Jackson could be on the trading block. He's had some problems down there. He wants to renegotiate his contract.
No, the question is Tolles. He's not heavy enough really to play every down. He's a 3rd down player.
He's similar. You remember when Michael Jackson and Keena Turner came out? They were in this 215 range. Anthony Griggs, when he came out, was 215. They're expecting Tolles to be in that 220, 225 range to play inside or outside.
We have about a minute 40 left on Buffalo's selection. They've already taken Bruce Smith, defensive end out of Virginia Tech, having signed him, and also defensive back Derek Burrows out of Memphis State. Quickly, gentlemen, in a word, if you can, who are they going to Bills open up the 2nd round with?
I think they're going to go for a pivot man. I think they need somebody for Will Grant. I think they're either going to look at Kevin Glover, as Zim mentioned. I think they could also look for Trainer Witz from Nebraska, or possibly Mike Kelly, who I thought was a 1st rounder.
All right, inside 90 seconds, the Bills about to pick. George?
Thank you, Bob. You're looking at Kevin Walsh, who is on the phone for the Buffalo Bills with closing in on a minute now left in their 15-minute allocation. The whole 2nd round will also go 15 minutes per team, and then after that, from the 3rd round on, it's just 5 minutes per team. Again, as we head towards, well, it should be, we should take you through 3 full rounds before we're off the air at 4 o'clock Eastern time, 1 o'clock Pacific time. Then, of course, we'll be updating you throughout the rest of the day. What do you guys see coming up on Buffalo? Paul?
Well, they talk defensive back. They got a defensive back, and they got a defensive lineman. The next thing they're looking at, they are looking for a very good offensive lineman. But the second priority they had was a wide receiver. Now, I don't know, are there any exceptional wide receivers left, Paul?
Vance Johnson's the best on the board, but I don't argue with Mel Kiper when it comes to Buffalo. He's wired to that team. He had them right with Bell last year, Burrows this year. He's got an in there. So I don't argue with Mel on this team.
All right, we're waiting for the commissioner. He has the card. Don Weiss bringing it up to the table. In fact, Don may make the announcement himself. Here's Don Weiss.
Buffalo's pick on the 1st choice in the 2nd round is Mark Trainowitz, tackle, Nebraska.
Great natural center. I hope they don't make a tackle out of him.
Mark Trainowitz selected, the tackle out of Nebraska. Coming up next, Minnesota. The Vikings will be picking in this, the 2nd pick of the 2nd round. We'll have that with ESPN's live and continuous coverage. Return.